I was there, but I can't remember.
All those. It's starting to move now. I'm hoping to have it by October.
Oh, your boats?
Maybe
Been
I'll
out for a while.
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, what's Jonathan when you smoke?
We're gonna have fishing during the summer.
No, no,
Yeah,
I
going out?
did it,
We
but
can certainly say, when I had a boat, I don't think on the third week.
How you doing,
Go
Larry?
straight through, yeah.
The house good?
Yeah.
All done? Everything's fixed perfectly now? Everything's painted perfectly and
whenever you're ready, Bob.
the floors are perfect and everything's great.
Things are pretty good.
You guys ready?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 7 PM. Please rise for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll call to order this meeting of the Town Council. The first item of business is announcements. Are there any to be made?
Good.
Next item is approval of the minutes of August 24th.
Motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
Discussion on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We have 3 department head reports, the town clerk, the administrator, and the finance director.
Motion to place the town clerk, town administrator, finance director reports on file unless anybody has any discussion.
I do.
Is a second to the motion?
I'll
Yes, sir. Go
second.
ahead, counsel.
Just to them, town administrator and the finance director. The first one was the town clerk's office, the sheetrock plastering painting carpeting. Is that because there was a leak in there on that big storm? Is that what that was?
There was some damage done to the walls actually while they were doing installation.
Oh. I didn't know if it was that leak. The next one, the RIDOT Little Compton Commons project. RID suggested 90% completion of the plans to continue to move the project forward. Its current 60% design. We had talked about with RIDOT for them to come back and schedule another meeting to come talk with us. Is that in the works?
Yes, it is. They actually working right now to 90% completion, and it's to be submitted by September 18th. But it also coordinate for them to return to provide a report to the council as to the status.
So we'd like to get a date for that, right? I mean,
We'll do that.
because that was a good meeting. They had a lot of people here, so that may take some coordinating. So I just wanted to stay on top of that one. The road paving program, it says Kevin Argia, Beta Group, met with President Mush and I to review the roads recommendation. How much money is currently in our money for the paving of roads?
Right now, okay, the last road project that we did, interesting enough, I know a comment was made before, I think there was quite a few years actually, was April 2022 was the last project we did in town. There was Maple, and that was through ARPA funds, and cost was $386,027.10 for that project, and that was again April 2022. Now, going to your question as to what we have. Because we use ARPA funds in 2022, we have some carried over funds. So we currently allocated for this present budget, 100,000 from ARPA, but that is also committed, 50 of that is committed to the project for the Commons, because as you recall, it was a $70,000 project that we were sharing with the state. We provided $35,000 deposit. We have another 35 plus the engineering, so I'm estimating that we're gonna need another 50 to complete the project for the Commons. So that being said, we have ARPA 100, carried over from, budget this year on capital FY24, we have 125. Carried over from FY23, $299,995. And that amount there, okay, the reason why we have so much money there is because we had a good winter. So any money that we had for roads or we had for sand and some of those things, we capture those funds to put into road for road improvement. So that's why you have a large number there. So that was not strictly just for road paving, it was a combination that we captured those funds. And for FY22 carried over, since we use ARPA funds, we had also a carried over of 160,500 for a total of $685,495. That's how much we have right now on the funds available. However, we also, if you recall, most recent, the governor committed $185,000 to each municipality. In addition to that, it was to be, each municipality would be getting so much per mile. So we have, and that actually was today, we had a Zoom meeting on this to get some training so we can put the application together to get the funds. And we actually going to be, we allocated from the state, I should say, $281,000. So in addition to 185, well, not in addition, so the 185 has turned into 281 because of the mileage that we have on the road. And also some municipalities who did not take advantage of the funds, they get reallocated across the board for all other municipalities. But in order to get the 281,000, the town has to do a match, and the match, it would be $571,000. So it's 2/3, how should I say?
2/3, 1/3.
Yes, thank you. So that would bring in a good piece of change to do roads. So we would be right around that mark. That being said, if we subtract the 571,000 from the 685,495, we end up with $114,495. That could be used, again, 50 of that would be used for the commons, then we would have a balance to be used for other projects in town.
Okay, thank you.
I can send
I get it.
a copy of this. Okay.
The last thing I have in your report is for Bob Mushin. Sorry, I didn't call you, Bob. It says DPW director, who is new, George Duar is a new director. He's going through a learning curve, but adjusting. He met with President Mushin and me to give his impressions of the department and operations. Can you report what that meeting was about?
It reviewed his readiness to assume the duty of Director of Public Works, and we discussed the kinds of things that we were accustomed to when we had a full-time director as opposed to a shared director as we have for the last number of years, with the previous director being tasked in the city of Newport as well. So that was the essence of our discussion with him, is to say we need hands-on, active involvement in public works in the town.
And one of his big responsibilities is taking care of the roads and finding out which roads need to be paved, as we discussed when we interviewed him. So I just want to make sure that he's going around and acclimating himself what roads need to be done. It's a big deal, the roads. I mean, you have the police, the fire, the school, and the roads are the fourth thing. So I think it's important that we stay on it, and we get him acclimated so he can report on the town roads and what we need to keep them paved correctly.
Unfortunately, when Kevin Agar was in town, he had to take a bereavement, so he was not available to meet. Otherwise, he would have been part of that meeting.
And the last thing is the finance director's monthly report. The fourth bullet point is 6 of 6 audit findings from FY22. Audited financial statements have been either remediated, or accepted as audit approved process improvements. I'd like to know what those 6 are. Maybe you don't know off the top of your head, so I don't want to put anybody on the spot. But if I could get those, that would be good, what those 6 of 6 were. It doesn't have to be right now. I'll have to dig them out of your head.
I'm not going to be able to do that, but
I could get that in my box. I'd appreciate that.
that was part of the letter that it was provided to all.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments on the filing of these reports? Are you ready to vote? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The next is an item of old business, discussion of proposals received from the police chief for possible amendments to 3 sections of the town ordinances. Chapter 3, generally, a change to penalties throughout the chapter. This is the penalty of police matters. Chapter 3.3 specifically to broaden it to include emphasis on the consumption, the public consumption of cannabis products, and in Chapter 4, the control and licensing of dogs. If you remember, each of these three have been brought before us in a less developed sense. We're now at the point where we need to assimilate the comments. Unlike a chapter of the unlike a modification to the zoning ordinance, this does not go to the planning board. This is our responsibility to decide, does this represent what we want to put before the people? Now, in addition to the things in your package and the things distributed to the citizens of the town before the meeting, there's one additional item which the police chief has forwarded to us, in which he has asked that we consider a slightly different language for Chapter 3-3.1. So as we go through this process, realize that what you have in front of you as draft indications are amended slightly by a phrase that has been recommended for insertion. Chief, would you like to walk us through that, or would you like me to simply?
So the reason for the addendum, that's pretty cut and clear. I wanted 3-3.1 and 3-3.3 to have the same wording for the description of public areas. So matching the description in those two chapters. So as there's no confusion as to what we consider, or what is considered a public area.
So to be clear, the ordinance in its final form would attempt to describe all public areas in the town in some specificity, so as to be able to say these items sorry, let me get to it. Activities in public areas, that's a revised title from a title that used to say, or it does say now rather, drinking and sleeping in all public areas. We've broadened that to say it's a paragraph that speaks to activities in public areas. The very first paragraph of that section is the one that the chief has recommended the modification that the counselors have in front of them with respect to the consumption of alcoholic beverages of any kind or the possession of any open container is prohibited in all public areas, and more specifically included but not limited to outdoor common areas, beaches, parks, athletic and recreational facilities, streets and other public areas of the town, with the exception of those places licensed for the consumption of alcoholic beverages. So it tightens that description so as to be clear that that's what we're talking about. That then becomes the basis for the word public area throughout the rest of the ordinance. And whenever you see public area, that's the public area definition. So that's that piece. 3-3.3 and 3-3.3 is an insertion of a new section regarding cannabis smoking and vaporizing in public areas being prohibited. And once again, no person shall smoke, vaporize cannabis in public areas, including outdoor common areas, parks, beaches, athletic, recreational facilities, and other public areas, using that same language. Finally, 3-3.4 gets revised to say any person who violates the provision of this, and the draft that you have in front of you says the provisions of this chapter, I would suggest that we modify that to this section, because we're only talking about section 3.3, not all of the chapter of disturbing the peace. So any person who violates the provision of this section may be fined $100 for first offense, $250 second, $500 for third. In place of a penalty, which was a $20 fine or a 5-day imprisonment.
Mr. President, if I may, additionally, in 3-3.1, I'd like to remove the last sentence. It shall be a misdemeanor for any person to consume alcoholic beverages to have in his possession, and place that under the 3-3.4, the penalty section. Keep the penalties consistent. Open containers of alcohol in vehicles is a traffic tribunal jurisdictional issue and a citation. So we're just going to keep the in public areas consumption under the new penalties.
The chief is correct. If the misdemeanor language stays, there'd be a question of jurisdiction. Does it go to RATT or does it go to the district court? It's better if it goes to RATT because they handle these matters. So I think that that change that's suggested by Chief Raines is appropriate.
Thank you.
Are we taking comments?
Yeah, so yeah, let's get clear. What we're trying to do here is to hone in on the issues that we have.
Yeah.
Decide what it is that the council wants to consider as the final draft and then bring that forward.
So I'm just looking for a little understanding. You know, I understand a lot of the edits we've made to the existing parts, but I'm just wondering what the impetus for 3-3.3 was about the cannabis smoking and vaporizing.
Well, with the legalization of marijuana and cannabis, the occurrence or the annoyance of smoke and/or the smell of marijuana or vaping, any CBD products, we're trying to alleviate. It's nothing we're doing by ourselves.
Yeah.
A lot of cities and towns have already adopted similar ordinances.
So previously, before it was legal, it was a crime.
Yeah, back in the day, possession of marijuana was a misdemeanor, yes.
Yeah, so now it's legal. It falls under the auspices of like alcohol.
Correct. There are certain areas where you're just not supposed to consume or smoke marijuana and/or consume alcohol.
Currently now, under your ordinances, it's lawful to smoke marijuana and THC products in public. Under section 21-28.11-16 of the general laws, there is language that says that if a town or a city wants to make that unlawful, you need an ordinance on this. And that's where Chief Raines is coming from. Other communities have enacted these types of ordinances, not for possession. That's lawful. It's for the consumption, for lack of a better term, vaping and things of that nature.
In
Public areas only, not private.
Have there been other communities that include smoking and vaporizing of tobacco products
Yes,
as well?
yes,
Prohibited?
yes.
Because I would consider adding that into this as well, if we're looking at it as an annoyance standpoint.
It's an extent, and you're correct. And that, I can tell you that it has happened, and I drafted that. It's an extension of those bans for the use of tobacco products, which many cities and towns have at athletic fields and things of that nature. It's an extension of that.
That would be my suggestion.
So you think it's proper to, not only marijuana vaping, but cigarette smoking in this section?
Actually, no, Chief, I'd put it somewhere else.
Yeah, I would.
And that's what other communities have done.
Okay.
But this is an issue that comes up when the question is you're talking about the use of cannabis. Then the next question is, what about tobacco use? Because as the chief has said, the issue here is nuisance. And the fact that, it's a nuisance to other people in public areas. So the next question is what about tobacco use?
So where would you put tobacco use prohibition? Because there's no other sections about tobacco use except for, there's one limiting, saying that you can't smoke tobacco in town buildings, that's 2.2. Then there's also prohibitions for firefighters smoking in their vehicles while they're on duty, and then,
In charge of them.
yeah.
Not in charge of them.
I'd create another section in this chapter
Okay,
specific to tobacco products.
I see. So you would do 3-3.4 or something? It would be a separate one from the cannabis smoke.
Correct, yes.
Okay, all right.
Would that be appropriate to put this in this section?
I don't know where else it would go. I'm looking at Chief Rains and he's giving me the same look. I don't know actually where else it would go unless you want to create a new chapter on
What
tobacco
I'm getting
products.
at, if you put something together that deals with tobacco and just added 3.3.4 is the penalty, I guess it'd be 3.3.4, and then the penalty would be 3.3.5.
Correct.
Would you be okay with that, or you don't want to muddy?
I'd have to look at other towns and how they worded it. I'm not sure I want to get into the cigarette
Okay,
side of things.
well, you're going to be the one enforcing it, so.
If you would, I would like to have the, and I apologize because I'm not prepared fully on this particular issue, but could you refer this matter to me so I can speak to Chief Rains on this? I have the language, I just didn't bring it with me, and I can show the chief what other communities have done. We'll see what we can come up with.
Okay.
So, well, you're referred.
We're on it.
The only caution
Thank you.
I would have on this, and this is I haven't had a cigarette in 30 years, so I thoroughly agree with not smoking, is I don't want to go after the guy driving down the road smoking a cigarette. If he's smoking marijuana or drinking, that's impairing his driving. I get that, but
You also have to, you're going to have to look at the cigarette use, the smoking of tobacco. What about smokeless tobacco? I mean, are we going to start talking to people about spitting on the sidewalk when they're.
Actually, before we get to that, on this, the issues that you're discussing, they always come up. These are legitimate issues to discuss, and the question is, if someone's in their car, is that a public place? The distinction for, the smoking marijuana is that now it's under the, driving while impaired statutes. But that's a real question, and, the chief and I could give you a debate for an hour on that. There's a certain amount of privacy that people have in their vehicles. Other communities have said, well, what about if somebody is on the sidewalk in front of their house? These are all issues that have been discussed and vetted. That's why I agree with the chief, probably not muddy the waters tonight, but I would like the opportunity to speak with him on this because it's something that has come up statewide.
Well, I would welcome it because I think it fits into the nuisance factor that these do, so.
Yes.
Yeah, Andy Ryan, 40 Paget Brook Road. I agree with Andrew Moore that the nuisance is pretty much the same, but I would ask you to go look in Goosewing Pond, and if you just walk in that where it's opened up, you'll get to see why you should get rid of cigarettes on the beach and other places. Because they don't stay where they're supposed to be. And that alone should be enough reason to eliminate them from the beach and other places. If people kept them in their cars or things like that, it would be one thing, but it's not. And with regard to the smokeless tobacco, I don't think you're banning gummies, right? The consumption of marijuana gummies at the beach, right? If you're not going to put that in the ordinance, you can't make that argument with smokeless tobacco. I find it as equally disgusting, but if you're not going to put that in there, you're not banning the entire consumption of any cannabis product. You're talking about the annoyance part of it. And so I think you're right to look at this, and it's annoying to be at the beach when somebody smokes, right? It really is, especially if your kids or you're beside of them or something like that. We should be able to not have environments like this. It's not healthy for people anyway. So, if you're going to not allow us to have a beer at the beach, then I think you could make the air and the goose wing in the area a little bit cleaner by getting rid of the cigarette butts too.
Sure. What's your pleasure? Would you like to have this? Yes.
Can we address some of the other proposals than the tobacco and cannabis that are here, like the animal one, the control of dogs?
I just got one. While we're on the,
To answer your question, we're going to address that separately from this discussion.
before we
Yeah.
get into the animal ones,
Go ahead.
I've been trying to get the parking fines increased from $20 along where there's no parking signs. No parking sign there. I'm having a problem at Secana Point. People parking in front of the no parking signs. they're getting a $20 ticket. So for them, it's just a parking pass. So I spoke with Chief Raines, and he looked into it today, and his suggestion, and he could correct me if I'm wrong, was to increase the parking fines to $50. And what was the $100 one for, Chief?
It would have been a handicap or fire lane violation.
Yeah, fire lane.
But we would have to, we'd have to reprint our parking violations.
Right.
To,
So I don't, that's not an ordinance change. We have the ability to change no parking fees without an ordinance change, don't we?
Correct.
Okay, so
50.
I'd like to put that on the agenda for the next meeting to,
I think, excuse me a minute, though, I think that's in the ordinance.
5-15.9.
Yeah, it's in our ordinance, so you'd have to amend the ordinance
Yeah.
okay.
in order to change it.
Regardless of how we do it, your request is that we include that in our next agenda, which I would think.
Well, then if it's got to be an ordinance change, then it should go in with this, because if we're doing ordinance changes, I think we should do all the ordinance changes at once.
You're not changing any ordinances tonight,
we're not-
you have to schedule. a
Right,
public
I understand that, right,
Right.
yeah. But I mean, just with the flow of everything else, once we, it's got to be changed in the book and everything, there's no sense having a public hearing on these and then put it in the book and then have to go back and,
The books are updated twice a year.
okay.
We collect them, and
everything.
then they update the book.
Excuse me, are you requesting that the proposal before you be amended to include an increase in the parking fines? Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm asking for, yeah, from $20 to $50, because people are looking at these, a $20 parking ticket as a parking pass. Sure, I'll park there, it's $20, why not? I got to pay 40 South Shore Beach, why don't I park at Secana for 20?
That proposal should be part of whatever motion that's taken at the end of this meeting
Okay,
as the matter moves forward.
okay. Because there's also a problem down at Town Way, if I'm not correct, and I've heard from several people down there that there's people doing the same thing, parking in the no parking areas. They get a ticket, and that's fine, they're there all day, and they figure, yeah, it's worth $20.
The impetus for correction or change to a section of the ordinance, I fully understand. It is not this section that establishes that. That's my issue, but we can certainly bring such in company with the next edition of section 3-1 and 3-4, for example, we could bring forward a section, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the chapter number.
Chapter 5.
Chapter 5,
Deals with traffic.
and we could propose a change there, as well as, back to the point earlier made, the section on control and licensing of dogs, section 4.1. So all of these could be done together in a single public hearing, but we're not ready to review them in the sense that we're able to review this material tonight. Just-
Well, that's my thought process, to have them all together, one public hearing, instead of having one public hearing, then another month later, have another one later. Chief, could you put something together with what the amended fees would be?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep. Have we answered all of the questions with respect to disturbing the peace? 3-1, which is one of, 3-1 and 3-3 activities in public areas. What we've discussed thus far is the specifics of 3-3 activities in public areas. We are now ready, I think, with that preface. Am I right here? I'm sorry, there's a new 3-6, which has definitions. 3-6 would be in addition to section 3, as would the change in fine from $20 to $250 for violations in section 3-5. So if I might summarize it again, that was inelegantly done. Let me try again. Section 3-3 seeks to define activities in public areas differently than we currently have them. And that's where the cannabis, the penalty phraseology, the damage to public property, those sections would be changed. That's 3-3. 3-5 would be changed to change a violation value, and 3-6 would be changed to add two definitions, one for cannabis and one for public areas. That's that part of our current discussion. We've now added a new dimension to that, saying Chapter 5 should be introduced, changes to Chapter 5 are recommended for modification to be brought back to us at the next meeting. And then before we finish with this whole subject, we have Section 4-1, control of licensing of dogs, 4-2, 4-4, dogs in general, and I think that's, which we haven't discussed at all. Are you ready to move away from cannabis, alcohol, public areas, fines associated therewith, and from, activities in public areas, and move on then to the Chapter 4, which is the control, Section 4, which is the control and licensing of dogs?
I'm gonna say yes.
I agree.
Okay.
Do you need a vote for that?
Not yet.
I don't need a vote. I just want to know where you are in the discussion. All right, Section 4-1 is proposed for change in that it seeks to give definition to unreasonably disturbing the peace. It gives definition to a dog, how a dog qualifies to be considered a nuisance. And requires owners or keepers of a dog to annually license the dog.
Which I think is just codifying state law.
That's those three things. Questions on that? Second is a change to Section 4-2, animals at large. It speaks to now to a broader description of the leashing of dogs, to the penalty associated with failure to properly leash a dog.
Wait, can we go back to 4.1 or 4-1?
Yes.
Just a question about the timing that you've indicated when they need to be licensed. So it would start on May 1st? And
It's in the month of April that you're supposed to relicense your dog, because it's
Okay.
supposed to be licensed by May 1st.
okay, all right. So that came from your office.
Well, that's a
recommend-
state law.
Oh, it's state?
That's state
Okay,
law.
all right,
Yeah, they're just codifying essentially what the state law
okay.
says.
So state law says April is when you're supposed to get it done
Yes.
by May 1st, okay.
Yes.
I found it to be kind of a weird time.
Right. That's the state for you.
Easy big guy.
I'm going there.
Hey, easy.
I am going there. You're gonna leash my dog, you're gonna leash the cats.
All right. And 4-4 is a new section. Is that accurate?
He mentioned it.
4-2, animals at large, describes leashing of dogs, both the fact of leashing or the requirements and the penalty associated with failure to do so.
Can I speak to that?
Sure.
So, first of all, I'd like to commend the chief for sticking with this, the animal control ordinance in general, parts of which really haven't been looked at for 40 or 60 years. And I'm looking at, my understanding, and I haven't looked at the current ordinance today, that 4-2.1 and 4-2.3 are new sections, the leashing sections. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yep. And so this is a change in the ordinance that I'm sure may not be universally appreciated, but I do think that it recognizes the reality of the community as it exists today in the 21st century, that I think this is fair to property owners and fair to the animals. That is, we can't expect dogs to police themselves. The current ordinance as it exists with a sort of archaic animals at large provision, which doesn't even mention dogs, is designed for basically the agricultural age. And that's not the age we're living in town in terms of how people care for, keep, and recreate with their dogs. So I think these two sections, 4-2.1, I'm not currently a dog owner, I have been, just acknowledge that, gives the police a clearer, concrete standard for enforcing control of dogs, which just really doesn't exist in our current ordinance. It would, when they investigate an incident where there's controversy, this is an issue that would be easier to clarify, I think, than the current ordinance, which can be interpreted somewhat subjectively. And as I say, it doesn't even mention dogs, the animals at large proposal. So, the other reason I've mentioned this before in previous meetings, I've observed and live now and have lived on private roads, which is where many of us live in town. This is where many of us live on private road subdivisions, many of which don't have through traffic, so there's less speedy traffic. In recent years, I've noticed, especially since COVID, I walk, run, bicycle in my own neighborhood and in other private neighborhoods because there's less traffic. But I certainly observe that some people, I live off of Long Highway, that people don't think of walking down Long Highway usually with a dog off a leash, but they turn into other neighborhoods, and some owners will just take their dogs off the leash in the private neighborhoods, and that's when there are confrontations or issues about the control of dogs. So most dog owners are responsible. Most dogs are not problems, but I do think that this new provision would recognize the reality of animal control in the town today. So I hope that you will take seriously the chief's proposal. The other question that arose when I read through this is that various provisions of the overall animal ordinance acknowledge the authority of the animal control officer. I believe that the animal control budget in the police department is fairly modest, $5,000 or something.
There's no line item for animal control. It's just an appointment by me. Sergeant Leclerc is our de facto animal control officer.
So I guess a question I have that begs a question is, do we have an animal control officer? Do we have facilities, vehicles, facilities, equipment for animal control? And if not, is there training? So it sort of begs another question about enforcement of the whole section, is the resources that we devote to it and the actual authority. But again, I commend the chief, and I would say I'm especially glad to see, because I think it recognizes the times and the situations that the police or the public safety personnel may face. The addition of a care of dogs section, I think, is important in this day and age, because we have seen other communities where, again, it's a mere fraction of animal owners who don't care for their dogs, and so we need some way to deal with that. So I thank the chief, and I do hope you consider moving this forward. Thank you.
Chief, can I just get a clarification with this proposed ordinance? This includes Simmons Pond, Wilbur Woods, beaches.
Yes.
Includes all of that.
Yes.
So as of right now, a question, as of right now, if you see a dog that's, say if the dog's wandering, in the middle of the road on a long highway and call a first responder, whether it's a fireman or a policeman, what do you expect them to say to you when you call them and say, hey, there's a dog wandering around in the middle of the road on a long highway?
What do we do?
Yeah, what would the response?
We'll send a patrol officer out, and I'll tell you, 9 out of 10 times, they know exactly who the dog belongs to. So we'll have already had interactions with whatever the dog may be, put them in the rear of the cruiser within the partition for the prisoners, transport them to the public safety complex, and they'll run around the public safety complex for an hour or two until we can locate the owner.
So you wouldn't, your officers or first responders, firefighters wouldn't respond to that and say, she'll be fine? You wouldn't accept that?
More than likely, we take the animal, bring it to the PSC. If we can't get a hold of an owner, more than likely, we're going to know who the owner is and say, so-and-so is going to be home at 3 o'clock from work. Call them then, they can come get their dog. Or it's transported to the West Place Sanctuary in Tiverton, and they're able to hold the dog for a period of time until the owner can come pick it up. However, before that owner can pick up the dog from the sanctuary, they have to come to the PSC, and we have to determine if it's licensed. If it's not licensed, it has to get licensed before it's picked up, and then it's allowed to be picked up from West Place and brought back home.
Right, so the expectation would be if you're traveling, you see a dog wandering around in the middle of a long highway and you call a first responder, you wouldn't expect them to say, she'll be fine?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
More than likely, we'll go out there and
Thank you.
if we have someone available, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
I want to echo Larry, and I really appreciate that this is back on the agenda again tonight. And I agree with Paul about the leashing of dogs in town. Although I've never been bit by a cat other than my own cat, right? But I have been bit by people's dogs, right? And so I think there is an argument for controlling dogs differently than cats. But I do agree with Paul about leashing of dogs. And I don't think we need to tell people they have to have their dogs on leashes all the time, because this is a very rural area. And I have friends that run with their dogs. Their dogs are perfectly well behaved. They might be playing out on the beach, right? There are dogs that, certain different times of the year, you can take your dog to the beach.
My answer to that is they're dogs. You cannot predict what they're going to do.
I get that, but I think this would be I really appreciate that we're actually going to do something here. I would just like us to think about the fact that we don't necessarily have to go as far, because what's going to happen is you're going to use your discretion to enforce a leash law here and there and not there. And then you're going to end up in a situation where sometimes it's okay for some people to have their dogs on a leash and sometimes it's not.
And that's the discretion that each officer is going to have to take each individual incident and determine the facts around that incident and then make a decision. That's the discretion within this.
I think that just, again, I am so glad to see us bringing this up, but I think that, there are very few dogs that are real problems in Middle Compton, and it's the dog owners, right? And, if somebody has an electric collar, for example, and their dog listens to every command they have. We were renting a house in Maine, and the person who owns the house, she's a professional dog trainer for Belgium dog, right? And she has total control over her dogs at all times, right? I really think that the standard in Little Compton could be a little different than it would be in a more urban or crowded area. And because we've had nothing for a long time, I think it would be worthwhile giving a little bit of trust to people, not to force people to have their dogs on a leash if they have command of their dogs. And, I've been bit, harassed, my kids have been harassed, right? We've been drove nuts in our neighborhood by this issue. But I still think it's a little bit too far after everything that we've been through.
I just, if I may, sir?
Sure.
I'm not against the leash law. I don't want the leash law to become a weapon. I don't like this guy, I don't like this girl, I don't like this person, and I see him walking their dog without a leash. I'm taking a video and I'm gonna turn him in. This is the discretion.
Not how we do things though, Paul.
No, I know it's not, sir, but I'm afraid that it could get morphed into this. It's like the guy smoking a cigarette in his car, and if we make a cigarette ordinance when he's in his car, you go to the beach with your dog, the way this is written, the way I see it, the way this is written, you go to the beach with your dog, you throw a stick in the water, the dog is, even if he's got his leash on and he runs in the water to get the stick, he's violated the leash law. You violated the leash law right there. What I want is, I want the officer to have the discretion to say, this dog is not being a problem, even though the person is complaining about it.
Mays in this ordinance have been changed, all the shalls have been changed to may.
Right,
The discretion is the biggest part of this entire ordinance.
right.
There's got to be a line, and then the discretion has to be, the officer's got to play on both sides of the line.
There is no may in that where shall allow, right? It literally tells you you're not allowed. There's no discretion.
4-1.7 enforcement, any
Yeah.
police officer or animal may, where applicable, enforce the provisions of this chapter.
So you're setting up a situation where you're gonna have people who are playing with their great dogs, and a neighbor's not gonna like their dogs or something, and they're gonna be off leash, and you're gonna say, well, that's our discretion, right? And you're not doing anything there, and then someone else has a problem, and I understand, I don't doubt you can do your job when determining whether the dog's a problem or not. I just don't, again, I just think it sends a message that you can't play with your dogs on the beach. Because there are people who are gonna read this and they're not gonna play with their dogs on the beach because it says they have to be on a leash, and they're not gonna there are people literally gonna read this and they're like, I'm not violating that, right? And I just think that, we live in an area where people wanna go run in their woods with their dogs or something like that, and they got command of it. I think we can win people that trust.
Well, if you read, and to back up the chief, and I owe an apology for the chief, because I skipped 4.17, I just went right into leashing the dogs. And he's told me this before, and I'm just, in my passion for dogs, because I have a few, there is the may. Any police officer may, where applicable, enforce the provisions of this chapter. So if you're at the beach with your dog and you're throwing a stick in the water and you're not bothering anybody, but somebody has a hissy fit, they don't like you, and they video it and try and then the officer can say, no, he's not, there's no foul here. Nothing's happened. The officer, and I trust our guys. They're very professional. I don't see them as taking a bias anywhere. And my thing about cats, I'm gonna go with you, sorry, sir, is when you register your dog, you have to pay a
No
fee
need to apologize.
to neuter feral cats and spayed feral cats. I think it's atrocious. What, you don't have to pay a fee to register your cat, but I gotta pay a fee for my dogs to get cats neutered? So that's my beef with cats, and it's not really with the cats, it's the law.
I talked to the chief about this when it came up last time. And I have dogs, and they're only 12-pound dogs, so they're not gonna bother anybody. But I walk through Wilbur's Woods and there's big dogs there. Nobody has their dogs on leashes, okay? They know if their dog's a problem. When they see me coming, they'll put their dog on the leash because their dog's either gonna take off or they may be aggressive. So I think what the chief's trying to do is give his guys, Andrew, you came here with some other people that had a problem with the dog up there and you wanted it leashed, okay?
We wanted fine.
Well, all right, yeah, somebody said they didn't want to go for a leash, but anyways, this gives these officers discretion whether they can do that. If they see a dog running after some little child, that's a problem, okay? That dog should be on a leash, and they can say that dog's gonna get leashed, or else next time you're gonna get a fine or whatever. These officers we have work for us in town, we've appointed all of them, and we do our due diligence, and they all have some pretty good common sense about everything they do. I think what the chief's getting at, if a dog's been a problem a couple times, then the guys are gonna tell that owner, this dog has to be leashed unless it's on your property, and you have to keep control of this dog. I don't think they're gonna go around, oh, there's a dog running free, let's take it to the pound. I don't think that's gonna happen.
I've had repeated issues getting police to come out and deal with dogs in our neighborhood. We have a long history. I've made dozens of calls, right? Videos, called, right? I mean, I had to get really aggressive with a dispatcher, explaining what Rhode Island dog law allows me to do to people's dogs that are aggressive, right? To get them to come out and talk to the lady, and she finally trained her dog, right? But it took, I think, 5 calls for that to happen. So I think discretion is really important, but there are areas where there shouldn't be discretion. There should not be discretion and a lot of hoopla to go through when somebody can't control their dog and their dog is dangerous. There should no discretion there. The dog should have to be confined, right? I mean,
I think everybody agrees.
Let me
with
ask
that.
the solicitor to comment on this if you would.
Because this is specifically to leashing, it goes to section 4.2. And I just want to add to the conversation because I think it's determinative of what this discussion is. The standard in 4-2.1, it's a negligence, 4-2.3. It's a negligence standard. And I think that's where the dividing line is on this thing. When we talk about discretion, it comes down to whether or not the dog is being handled in a negligent fashion. And I think that's what gives the police officers the discretion they want. Answers your question, and it answers everyone else's question too. It's a negligence standard that's been built into the ordinance. So I think that's I just wanted to add that. I think the chief did a good job on that. And that's something that tracks state law, and it tracks the law in other communities also.
Any more on
Let's get off the leash and move forward.
chapter 4? Yes.
you're gonna go down to aggressive dogs and stuff. You're covering one by one, I guess, right? You're not.
What I'm striving to do is to take from this discussion a set of requirements that will result in something that comes back to us to revise chapters 3 and 4. So I want to be sure that we collect the issues that are with the changes that have been proposed to date.
So I'd like to talk about aggressive dogs because, again, we have our experiences with aggressive dogs. And to get this statute met requires you to meet a Rhode Island state law. And I tried to get this I tried to get a dog labeled aggressive dogs, but I couldn't get anyone to actually meet with me or do this in town. So this requires an officer to go before court and have the dog deemed aggressive, right? That's a lot of work to get done to get a dog deemed aggressive, when I think you could do that a lot easier, with a lot more concrete action, because, having been bit by a dog, right? Having been bit by a dog, filing a police report, trying to get that dog, right, deemed aggressive to set a tone in the neighborhood so we can have a problem with it. I couldn't get that done because the state law that I couldn't get anybody to work with me on that. And it says Rhode Island 4-13-1-1, right?
-11.
-11.
Sorry, thank you.
Having prosecuted vicious dog cases, it's difficult to get to court. But what other communities have been doing is the SPCA has a hearing procedure on that. And have you contacted the SPCA?
Well, they've moved, so it's not a problem. It's not a problem anymore. What I'm saying is I've tried to use these. Because we've had so many issues, right? And I just think getting to court takes so much effort. It doesn't have to be that hard to put a little bit more pressure on someone or to not let them allow their dog to leave their yard legally, right? And I think you could amend the definition and take that out and define it how you're going to do that yourself instead of relying on the Rhode Island statute to do that. Because again, I don't think, unless somebody actually bites a kid, really, really hurts someone, you're probably never going to use the statute to do that, right? I have experience in that. Couldn't get anybody to really work with me on that. And so I would really encourage you to look at how you're labeling things as aggressive and go a little further, a little easier here for the town, so you don't have to take someone to court necessarily to deem their dog aggressive.
Good points. Can I ask you, how long ago did that happen with the dog?
kids were 6 months old, so it happened like May of 2014.
Okay, so since that time, I can tell you that, at least with the state law, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but the process now is the SPCA will have a hearing on that, and they have a dedicated officer for matters of this nature. And that's the way that they've been handled. If it's a dog that has caused a lot of damage, then the visit is to district court. But there is this hearing process. The hearing officer is actually the executive director of the SPCA, who's a lawyer. And we've been using that procedure in other communities. It's authorized by state law. It's a lot faster on how it goes. We've gotten good results on that. So I think that since your incidences, things have changed. So I think the language that you have here is sufficient to that. And it's not, doesn't take a visit to the court. At least that hasn't been my experience.
And we have used the SPCA hearing at least twice in the 4+ years that I've been here
Yes.
to determine aggressive dogs, and they were determined aggressive, and, you know, certain sanctions were levied, and to me, I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think we've had any issues with those two incidents.
No, I haven't either, Chief. And, you know, there were, I don't know the exact year that the changes took place, but that your complaint was a complaint from a lot of municipal lawyers that, you know, it was almost impossible to send a dog to the ACI after a hearing. But this procedure was come up with the SPCA and law enforcement on it, and I'm happy to hear that the chief has been using it. I know other communities have too.
Well, and I really appreciate that, because I think the biggest deterrent I think you're going to have on this issue really is the fact that you're going to require insurance for aggressive dogs, right? I think that is a huge deterrent for people to get people to train their dogs correctly, right, and be better dog owners, right? It's just to have that there, but to make sure that you can get there without having to go to a point where you never actually reach that. I think that would be a huge help. And then I have one more. That's okay.
With respect to chapter 4?
Yes.
Yeah.
The schedule of fines. You have a $100 starting fine for cannabis ordinance. And I would say that the dogs are they're a lot more of a nuisance. And you know, it's not publicly smoking cannabis. So I would really appreciate, again, if you look at that and actually put some teeth behind that, because, you know, $20 no parking sign, $25 for the first offense is not I don't know how many offenses one of our neighbors is on right now, but if it was a lot more, it would probably encourage people, again, to be better dog owners.
I agree with you. I do.
Do you have a recommendation?
100, 250, 500, same as the others.
I agree with that too.
100, 250, and 500?
Correct.
So when this goes to public hearing, those will be the new numbers in there, Bob?
That's what,
And that's per calendar year. So
Per calendar.
3 events is 1 year. You start over the next year.
right. Okay. So are there any other comments regarding the proposed changes to ordinances in chapters 3 or 4?
Only on 4.4, the care of dogs, I gotta commend the chief for adding this section, because there's nothing more horrible to see than a dog chained up to a coop with no food or water and no attention to be paid, which would in turn turn that into a vicious dog, because the dog would get loose.
Absolutely.
So thank you, chief, for adding that section.
I got to thank Chief too. I think he did a tremendous job on this. It's been long overdue, and you did it in a very good fashion.
It was a group effort over there, so.
But, well,
Thank you.
tell all the guys they did a good job.
Do we want to change the numbering? There's 4.
There's a lot of numbers.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of.
Thank you.
Let me just summarize then what I heard. In chapter 3, section 3-1 remains unchanged, except for, sorry, it does not remain unchanged. punishment by imprisonment has been removed from the penalty section. So section 3-1 has a penalty change. Section 3-2 has a fine change. The change isn't fine, there's a change to the fact that there is a fine. Section 3-3 inserts cannabis language and penalty language that was not there before. Section 3-4 changes the fine value. Section 3-5 changes the fine value. And section 3-6 is new and has definitions. So these will come back to us incorporating the comments that have been made for a second review by the town council prior to a public hearing, so as to be able to be sure we've got it right.
The amendment to the parking, section 5 is in there also.
And the amendment to the,
That's
Right.
5-16.
and then, right, and then, okay, so, and we've also agreed that chapter 5, specifically 5-16, will come forward with, there will be brought forward an amendment to the
Yeah.
parking fines. Section 4 then, subparagraphs 4-1 on control and licensing, the red that was there on barking, biting, and howling dogs and disturbing the peace remains. The section on annual requirement for licensing, and the section on how complaints are made. All of that remains as described in the proposed revisions. 4-2, animals at large. Those changes on leashing of dogs and the associated penalty gets changed. Section 4-3, it's in blue. I'm not sure what that means. That's not changed, I think. That's
I believe that, is that the licensing?
aggressive dog.
Oh,
Aggressive.
that's the
The
aggressive.
dogs, it's in blue.
That's new. Should have been red.
It should have been red.
All right, section 4-3 is new in its entirety, and section 4-4 on care of dogs is significantly changed in that there is a set of paragraphs prior to that. And then section 4-5, the schedule of fines, is different from the draft in that we've agreed that that should come forth with 100, 250, 500. Those then constitute the result of this careful deliberation on the draft that's been presented, and the result will be a second draft that's brought forward with an effort to then send that to a public hearing. Seem right?
Yes.
Or can we streamline that at all? I think not, personally. I think need to be sure we've got everybody on board. All right. I would then seek a motion to refer back to the chief and solicitor, the changes that have been proposed and the changes to the changes that we've discussed this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Is there further discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The next item of business then is new business. And the first of those is a request from Ed Burnett to use Veterans Field and Recreational Field on August 17th, 2024 for what will be the second annual Caitlin Fennessy Burnett Soccer Tournament.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The second new business item is to authorize the solicitation of requests for proposals for engineering services for the reconstruction of the town tennis courts, which is in your package.
Motion to approve.
Second it.
Motion made and seconded. Yes, go ahead.
Just want to thank the ad hoc committee. Lavinia's here. Thank you, Lavinia. Tony. Carol did a great job too. I don't know if anybody knows, she's behind the scenes doing it. And also Ed Mayotta was on the ad hoc committee. I just want to point out one thing in your packet. It's the general information. The town's tennis pickleball courts with the ejector replacing the two courts. Professional opinion as to the impact or no impact on the adjacent multipurpose soccer field. So I think it's important that whatever we do down there, we know how it's going to affect the soccer field, the walking path. 8 years ago, we had quite an endeavor, raised a lot of money, a lot of people contributed to that. So we want to make sure that whatever's done down there doesn't affect that in an adverse way. And on your second page, it says qualifications, engineering credentials, and references, minimum of 5 references of clients for projects of similar size and scope for this kind of project with contact information. So that was put in there, so we can try to get the best engineer we can, and that they have references that they can give us and have done exactly what we're asking them to do, and they have experience doing it. Those are the 2 things that you'll see in this RFP. Benny, I don't know if you want to add anything to it.
No, we're ready to go.
All right. I'm sorry, did I have the motion in a second? Yes.
You did.
Discussion on that, any further? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. And the third is to receive a report from the Wilbur Woods Committee and consider approving its recommendations.
I'll defer to Tony somewhat on this because he was active, involved in it as well. But I wholeheartedly support, through many considerations and different things going on, they want to move forward with repairing the bridge that's existing on the, pick a direction, south or east, I don't know. Somebody calls it the South Bridge, somebody calls it the East Bridge, whatever, the bridge closest to Swamp Road, how about there?
By a fish was East Bridge.
Well, all right, so, and there's money set aside for it. I recommend approval, but I'll let Tony give any little details he wants.
I concur with what you said. You did a very good job covering it, so there's not a whole lot more to be said. I mean, it's been going for quite a bit of time, the whole discussion about the much-needed improvements in the area, and certainly the bridge.
It'll allow emergency vehicle access to the other side of Wilbur's Woods. There'll be a bollard, a removable bollard on the, we'll call it the East Bridge, yeah, but which side?
South side of the East Bridge.
The left or right?
The bridge.
The bridge.
I'm happy to make the
There'll
motion.
be a removable bollard so it can be taken out so emergency vehicles or the police can get through.
I'm happy to make the motion for the bridge to be repaired.
The motion is made and seconded to both receive the report and approve the recommendation for construction of the bridge. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. President, if
Yes.
I may, the important point to state here is the fact that Arkans is stepping up, at free, just the cost of the materials.
Yeah,
So there's quite a bit of savings being made through this.
And that's my bad. I should have mentioned and given Tommy the credit. Arkans Construction is gonna supply all the labor for free and the materials at cost. So it's a win-win for the town.
Couldn't agree more. And great follow-on to the bridge that he constructed on the other passage, not too many years ago. Further discussion. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Thanks to Tom and to Arkans Construction. Next item is communication request from Caroline Wilkie, Wardell, Cora, and Mike Rocha to use Pikes Peak for the month of November 23 to honor veterans with a banner and installation of over 900
Motion to
flags.
approve.
I'll second it.
Motion's made and seconded. Do you have anything that you'd like to say on?
Really, we're hoping to maybe have a few more flags there. Somebody said to me the other day, you need more, and I went, always need more. But we have a few flags to replace, and I'd like to add maybe another 100, so there'll be 1,000 flags.
Thank you. Thanks for this effort. All in favor of the motion? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. A letter received from James Bradley and Judith Curtis asking the council to represent them before the various Rhode Island and federal government entities to cull and control deer population in town. I sought the advice of the solicitor, who I don't think personally has engaged any deer, but has some experience in.
Keeps driving back and forth to Little Compton. He's going to have an.
Do not say that, I beg you.
He'll eventually have that consideration, yeah.
The town administrator says I don't drive fast enough to be concerned with that. There's actually 2 routes that can be taken here, and what I like to do is look back to what the town of New Shoreham did some years ago. There was a real deer population on Block Island. They got the DEM to put in some emergency regulations that allowed for the culling of the population out there. And what DEM did is enacted the regulations on a temporary basis as an emergency, because they said it was an emergency. And then they hired vendors to go out there and actually thin the herd, so to speak. but New Shoreham had to pay DEM for that. There was a fee for that, and they had to pay the guys to go out and do the hunting. I don't know if the population down, because I don't know if the population down here in Little Compton warrants DEM enacting those emergency regulations, which would allow for that controlled hunt. I don't. But assuming that that's not the case, I think the better approach is under section 20-15-3. That allows a property owner to obtain a permit from the DEM, which would allow them to control the deer population on their own property. The fee is $25. They need to make a showing to the director that the deer on their property is damaging the property to the extent that this permit is warranted. It seems to me from reading the letter that that's probably the best route to take here. I'm not so sure that the town has a role in this, and probably the fastest way and the least expensive way to proceed would be to have the property owners proceed under that section 20-15-3.
So if they get that DEM permit, so they hire people to go in there and shoot the deer, is that right?
No, actually, I think they can do it themselves.
Yeah.
They're gonna be run,
I think they,
so they'll go around shooting deer
I
in their
think they
yard?
have to do it themselves.
Really?
This chief would be better on this than me.
The permit does come, it comes from DEM, but it does go into my office for my signature as well for the deer damage. Most of the time, it's damage to the, to the crops, obviously. This culling of the herd, so to speak, is, I'm assuming it's town-wide. Just, we've had, I think, an uptick in car versus deer accidents this year. So I don't know if that added number of deer are doing actual damage, or they're just kind of floating around and wandering in the car.
I get 8 to 10 deer every night at the farm, and you just go out.
They jump in front of me every day.
They're all over the place. So
The first thing is under the statute, it's owner or employee, so somebody could be engaged to do that as an employee. That's first thing. The second thing is and this is the third thing, I didn't want to recommend it, but the town administrator has some experience with this because the town of Bristol has a surprisingly big deer problem out there. And what they've done is designated certain areas where there can be hunting by archery. And they did it in partnership with the DEM. He's actually more familiar with that, with how that happened than I am. I'm aware of it. But if it's a town-wide issue and it needs to be addressed on a town-wide basis, you may want to take a look at what Bristol did on this to control their deer population.
So how can we get the correct data of how many deer we have, or if we have a problem here in Little Compton? We have to pay the DEM to do that?
I think, isn't DEM requesting people that they call in
Yes.
deer right now?
PA sent out a link, we're
Yes.
supposed to be counting deer in our yard. But don't call.
So there's no professional that's gonna come down here and tell us we have a problem with deer, with overpopulation, specifically in this area and that area. That's not gonna happen.
Well, Patrick, as a biologist, I can tell you that there are ecologists out there that New England is infested with deer and it is destroying the forest.
Right, I mean, that's obvious, but,
If you want an expert
yeah.
to come in and talk to you about it, there are people who study this and who have really encouraged towns to deal with it.
I just want somebody to tell me how far over are we here? How many, how infested are we?
Double or triple.
Yeah, but I mean, that's fine, but you're not an expert. I want somebody to tell us, what's going on here. But besides that, they get this permit so the guy can go out there and just start shooting deer in his yard, solicitor, is that
I
right?
just want to point out, one of the problems with shooting deer is you have to.
Yes or no?
Once they're shot, and that's the whole issue. And people who actually do go out and shoot deer for sport have to go in there and gut them, and it's a whole big huge process. It's not as easy as just shooting a deer. it doesn't disappear.
Well, so, sir, can I ask you a third time on that?
Yeah, actually, what happens is I just checked with the administrator. DEM will come down.
Yeah.
And they'll tell you if they think you have a deer problem.
Yeah,
That's the first thing.
specifically in that area, that yard.
Well, no, I think it'd be town-wide.
Townwide, yeah.
I think it'd be a more of a town-wide,
So it'll be one, so it'll take one person to call for us to get that data?
I think, yes.
I think it's Kenny.
Would there be
And
a,
it'll cost us $25 for that data.
Oh, no. The $25 is for the statute. If someone has the property and they want to get a permit to kill a deer on their property,
Yeah.
$25.
Yeah.
That's it. For DEM to come down and give a presentation, Bristol didn't spend any money for that at all.
Zero. They just come down and they have a pretty good handle, let me tell you, throughout the state with the deer population is.
Yeah, so I'd be,
would there be a motion that we
I'll make the motion.
charge the town administrator with contacting DEM for the purpose of determining the scope of our problem, our deer problem here, the EER problem here, and that return to the council with a proposed rectification.
I'll make that motion exactly that way.
I'll second it then.
Motion's made and seconded. Is there further discussion?
Yeah. What about if we opened up the hunting season for, isn't it
I
closed?
don't have jurisdiction over that.
That's it, that's actually a state, that's actually a state thing.
The problem is,
Unless it's a controlled kill.
the problem is, most hunters during hunting season want to take out bucks. That doesn't do anything for the deer population. You have to take out does, so they got to increase the doe stamps. Sorry, sir.
I believe that the intended action of the motion will uncover all of these facts.
There you go.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
So Solicitor, just to be clear, these people that wrote the letter, I forget where I put it.
Bradley and Ms. Curtis.
So if they call up DEM, DEM's gonna come down to their house and they're gonna see what damage is done. If they feel it's deemed, they'll give them their permit for $25 and they can go shoot deer in their yard.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
But just one last thing. Your ordinance does not allow the killing of deer on Sundays. You need permission from the town council to do it on that day.
It's hunting on Sundays.
Right.
Whatever.
Thank you.
Motion was made and seconded, sir.
I believe it was already voted.
So let's go to the
That
next.
was voted already. I couldn't be
Let's go to
there.
the senior van then.
Next item is to receive an update on senior van services from Mr. Administrator.
I thought it would be time to share the information so far as to how things have worked out since we acquired the van in March of this year. And Mike Rocha has coordinated the service, for the seniors, and Mrs. Rocha, Barbara Rocha, has undertaken the dispatching duties. She's done a great job. Any of our seniors need transportation, call, and obviously, they will be, scheduled for a pickup. Big thank you, as I pointed out, there's 3 individuals who volunteered. They really, and I get logs, so I know how many people have been transported and how often, in all the areas that they've taken our seniors to. Kevin Murphy, Corey Sutherland, and Mike Rocha Senior, these 3 individuals have volunteered their time and have been very instrumental in providing the transportation. The places, the locations they've attended, lunch at the community center, wellness center, field trip to South Shore Beach, shopping at Market Basket, shopping at Lee's Market, shopping at CVS and wellness center. Well, wellness center, I have that twice, don't I? Okay. Obviously I stated how many gallons of gas have been used, 184 gallons of fuel have been used. And we've had some expenses incurred, for the transmission and also for AC. But it's pretty functional and it has served its purpose at the present time.
Great report. Thank you.
Motion to place on file.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Fourth is a copy of a communication sent by Mimi Carlson to the harbor master requesting a year off from the use of her Sakana Point mooring. Counselor, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. This is something, if somebody has a problem getting their water, or else they have a medical situation where they can't use their boat, they'll generally write a letter to the Harbor Commission, Harbor Master, and ask for a 1-year sabbatical, which is standard procedure. It happens once every 3 or 4 years. This lady's husband had open heart surgery, and I know her personally, and she can't get on the boat without help. So I've talked to the harbor master and the chairman of the Harbor Commission. He said that this will probably get approved at the next Harbor Commission meeting. So I'm not sure why it came to the council.
It's a copy that we received at the direction of the person who sent it to the harbor master.
Motion to place, I'll second.
Motion is made and seconded to place this communication on file. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The consent file.
Motion to place consent calendar on file unless anybody has any questions,
I'll second
comments,
it.
wants to pull anything.
Motion made and seconded. Is there further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
The payment of the bills.
Motion to pay the bills.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
There being no further business before us, I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. A fruitful session, and we'll be back to you with some revised ordinance recommendations.